Let's cross to London now and catch up with former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer, also former federal leader of the Liberal Party. Good to talk to you again, Alexander. I mentioned your former leadership of the party because you've written about where the party's at the moment for the Australian Financial Review, with Labor in power, state and federal, across the mainland. Interesting that you talk about cycles. John Howard has talked this week about political cycles too. But you think the zeitgeist is kind of against the Liberal agenda, that we're in a big government zeitgeist at the moment?
Yes, there are two particular policy areas which have contributed to that. The most important has been the response to COVID, where, I think a scare campaign has been run in many Western countries, including Australia, about the dangers of COVID. Lockdowns, huge amount of compensation paid, massive blowouts in budget deficits. But the public have bought all of this and have thought that the governments have done the right thing, not just by locking down, but by compensating everybody with huge subventions of public money. The problem with that is that that generates inflation. The problem with inflation is that it increases interest rates and contributes to people's fall in real living standards. So sound money has been cast aside in the interest of the response to COVID. The second thing is climate change. I mean, you've been talking about it in the context of Barack Obama. It just rolls off the lips how we're going to achieve net zero by 2050 and all that sort of stuff. But the huge cost involved in dealing with this issue, and much of it wasted money, the huge cost involved will be crippling in the end, or else many of these programs will be abandoned.
There's no doubt that you're right to say the zeitgeist is heading in this direction, but I would say the other problem, though, is that the Liberals don't contest any of this. And at election after election in this country, not to mention the country you're in at the moment, there has not been a right of centre counterpoint or even a party where you can park those votes. No one's really tested those because no one's prepared to run the alternative argument.
No, well, you've got a situation, haven't you, where you've got the Democrats in power in the United States and now Labor in power in Australia, the left in power in Canada and New Zealand. And the UK, the Conservatives have been all over the place and are just starting now a bit of a fight back and starting to pursue their own agenda. But there are all sorts of cyclical and political reasons for these things all coinciding with each other. I always say this about the Liberal Party in Australia: it has to be prepared to fight its corner. There is no point in thinking that there is any basis for people voting for you if all you're doing is following in the wake of your political opponents. I've just been reading a book about Billy McMahon. I mean, I know he's ridiculed and not seen as a great Prime Minister, but between 1971 and 1972, what the Liberal Party did was follow the lead of the Labor Party. And of course, they lost the election.
Yep.
The important thing is the Liberal Party get out and make arguments and are prepared to fight their political opponents. You cannot win in politics if you're not prepared to have the courage to have a fight.
Spot on. Now, let me segue to foreign affairs now and big global issues. I know it's almost a week out now, but I'm very interested to get your take on that visit, that meeting, that high-level meeting between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping flying to Moscow to meet the Russian leader. Very, very grand meeting. How worried should we be in the West that these two are working so closely together, or are we at risk of over-interpreting this?
Well, it's certainly not a good thing that the Russians and China are so close together, although what's interesting is that China isn't wholeheartedly behind the Russians on the Ukraine war. They're putting forward some sort of peace plan. And whatever you think of their peace plan, it's a series of motherhood statements, really. It's not likely to be very helpful. But what the peace plan does indicate that they don't want to get solidly behind the Russians. So I think that is a good thing. But more seriously, on a broader geopolitical scale, it's problematic because the Russians and the Chinese governments want to weaken the West. They want to weaken the rules-based international system. They want to weaken the system that has proved so successful over many decades since the Second World War. And they want to get more control of the world themselves. And so the lesson for all of us is that we have to be prepared to collaborate with each other as Western countries, and we have to be prepared to put the effort in to provide effective deterrence. And I think there are some good signs that that is happening, but we're going to have to maintain that pace, and that's going to be difficult and it's going to be expensive.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us, Alexander. I appreciate it.